YouTube. This is Ty, your Metalhead Weatherman. I hope you guys have had a good Thursday. Getting towards the end of the work week here, right? For a lot of us, myself included. So, said it 1,000 times, and I finally got this thing back up and running again. Whenever I have radar Omega up, something's going on, and of course, as you can see here, there's a tornado warning. This is only one storm, but I bet to any of you that are watching this, some of you are probably thinking, Ty, this is only one storm. And it's just one tornado warning. Who cares? It's radar indicated at that. I want you to take notice of this area right here. This is our severe weather area. This is where our slight risk is. And this little green line that this thing's outside of is outside of the marginal risk. This is in a general thunderstorm risk area. And we got a tornado warning. Yeah, it's radar indicated, but come on, like that's crazy. So at 6:15, severe thunderstorm capable of producing tornado 7 miles northwest of Marshfield, moving east at 15 miles per hour. Also capable of producing ping pong ball size hail. But I always say that even if you're in a marginal risk, the tornado threat, and if you have a 2% chance of a tornado within 25 miles of a given point, that is not a 0% chance. And this is living proof right here. Will this thing actually produce a tornado? Hard to say. I actually kind of want to take a look at the rotation here. If I can pull this up, I may actually have to go to the local radar from the National Weather Service. Just give me a second here. And here's our storm. Pull this up real quick. By the way, this is just one of the many features that Radar Omega has. That's why I was pushing so hard to get this thing back up and running. But look at that. So now we can get up close and personal with this storm. Waiting for the pixelation to kind of die down just a little bit. And then we also have different types of radar modes we can look into using this thing. I don't know if this is updated yet. Oh, wait, I think I clicked the wrong thing. Oh, there we go. I clicked the wrong mode. So here we are. Let's go to this, try it again. Boop. And here is our storm. And this will probably clear up some of the pixelation too. There we go. That's what we're looking for. That's the stuff. And you can see our little inflow notch here in the south and southwest side of this storm. See a little bit of lightning forming around it. Means the storm is intensifying. And this has a pretty impressive looking signature without looking at the any of the wind velocity products. Look at the base velocity and the storm velocity. And there is a little bit of a couplet here. Let's take a quick look. So basically, I'll give you a quick little tutorial on how to read this kind of radar. This is a wind velocity radar at the surface. And there's two colors here that you have to worry about for the most part, green and red. Green represents wind going towards the radar. Red represents wind going away from the radar. And when you see those two touch, that means there's an area of rotation. And the tighter the couplet is, as we call it, the tighter the gradient, the stronger, the tighter the rotation, and the higher the likelihood of there being a potential tornado. This is a moderately tight rotation. It's nothing incredible. When I actually do like an instructional video on this, I'll show you something a little bit more impressive. But I'm pretty much deviating here. The main thing I'm saying is just because you're in a marginal risk area, or in this case, not even in a severe weather risk area, you always got to be careful because there's always that one storm that can be There's always one storm that can be an outlier, and in this case, it's this one. And this little storm complex has a couple areas of rotation from the looks of it as well. Like there's a small little areas of rotation all around it, but this one is the most significant by far right now. But I do think that this one could have the potential to be tornado warned a little bit later if it intensifies any further. But anyway, the main reason we're here is to talk about the severe weather threat for tonight and into tomorrow. You can see the severe storms, as I showed you in Radar Omega, the severe storms haven't really even formed yet much in the slight risk areas that we had just talked about here. So we'll briefly go over what the radar could look like over in this area tonight. But what I'm really interested in talking about is Friday. If you look here, you can see that we have an enhanced risk on Friday. I had a hunch that they may go with this, but I wasn't entirely sold on it either. But it turns out, though, that lo and behold, they saw the same thing that I saw and were a little bit more confident than I was. But then again, that's why these guys are professionals. And we now have an enhanced risk that pretty much extends from north of Lubbock all the way in Lubbock, Texas, just north of Lubbock, goes all the way through Kansas and into southern Nebraska, into central Nebraska even. So areas like McCook, Nebraska, Colby, Kansas, Garden City, Kansas, Liberal, Kansas, and Amarillo, Texas, you guys could have an increased potential for severe storms tomorrow. And all the threats are there. Tornado threat, this area has a 5% chance of seeing a tornado within 25 miles of a given point. And then there's a cheeky little 5% area around South Dakota, which is kind of unexpected. But there was a little bit of a wind maximum there yesterday from what I saw on the radar, on the, not the radar map, but the low-level jet. So, well, not wind maximum, but there was a little bit of an increased lower-level jet around there. So it doesn't surprise me. We do have a 30% chance of damaging wind threat. That's winds above 58 miles per hour, or straight line winds above 58 miles per hour associated with thunderstorms. And then right here, this is the main thing that if there was going to be an enhanced risk, this is why it was going to be called. It was going to be called for the hail threat. So we've gone up to a 30% chance of seeing severe hail. And they even put a hatch risk out, which means we could see hail greater than 2 inches. And this has Garden City in it. Liberal, Kansas as well. You're in this. This goes a little bit further south. Lubbock, you're in it. Midland, you're just outside of the 15% and the hatch risk. And that's all I got for this. And then we also go to day 3. And we'll talk about this a little bit. This is a really interesting, really weird setup. But look how far north this has gone. This is kind of crazy to think about. But we have a slight risk that goes as far south as Oklahoma City and Norman, but goes all the way towards Fargo, North Dakota. Like I said, it's very unusual to see severe weather in areas like Pierre, South Dakota, let alone North Dakota. This is something that you see in June and July, not in April, not in late April. This is kind of weird, kind of crazy to think that we're getting conditions that are favorable for this. And this is a slight risk, no less. And then it pretty much encompasses almost all of Minnesota. Minneapolis, you are in it. Duluth, you're just outside of it. And then not too far away, just outside the marginal risk, is Grand Forks. That's crazy. And then there's a marginal risk that includes Wisconsin. La Crosse, you're in this as well. Duluth, you are in that marginal risk. And then this goes as far south. This goes all the way, the marginal risk goes even all the way to the Texas-Mexico border, which is kind of crazy. But we'll talk a little bit about that. We can't really get into the hazard types yet because we're still 72 hours out. A little less than it now, but still, there's not really a lot of I can go into detail with at the moment. So we're going to take a look at the storm system on the geopotential metric here. This also represents the warm and cold air situation that we have going on over the country. Around the eastern half, our ridges developed. A lot of the same areas that were hit by this nor'easter now, we're we're probably seeing the end of any residual snowfall at this point. And around the south, we are getting very warm into the weekend around my area. We can expect highs into the 80s, and even in the morning, we're getting lows in the mid to upper 50s, and some places are even pushing into 60s. That's my area, and then areas further to the south, we are getting 60s in the morning. Some areas may even push 70s. And then for highs, there's some places that are hitting 90 and above. There might be even a cheeky 100 in Florida. But right around the backside of this is the area that we'll be watching for our storm system and our ongoing severe weather threat. Meanwhile, in the northeast, we have little mid to upper level system after upper level system coming in with plenty of cold air, plenty of moisture, and snow for most of the higher elevations. Some of the valleys you might get a little bit of rain. But let's go forward with this, and we'll watch our storm system take shape. It's a very stout storm system too, because you can see how the isobars are starting to tighten up around it. Look at that. And there we go. This is our bowling ball. It's going to be producing our severe weather over the next couple of days. Look how strong this gets. I've said this before, but the tighter the isobars around this little bowling ball, the stronger the storm. This is a positively tilted trough, though. It's not a nightmare scenario, but it's definitely going to be enough to trigger some severe weather, potentially significant. I think the damaging wind threat's going to be a little bit more elevated, even on Saturday. Tornado threat's going to be a little bit lower, but we can't rule it out. So move this along, and by Monday, this storm system's out of here. And that's all I'm going to show for that. So let's take a look at what the radar could look like tonight. And we just got the HRRR to finish loading, which is awesome. So main point of interest is going to be right around the Central Plains tonight. So, I mean, there is some activity right there, but it's not very stout. We'll have to watch real closely around Central Kansas into the late evening and overnight hours. I do think that the atmosphere is not quite unstable enough until late evening hours in order for us to get a severe threat. But when we get the sounding here, take a look at that. There's our tornado threat. There's our loop on the Hordiograph. But I noticed that the temperature, there's not a very steep lapse rate. So this could limit the threat. But we'll have to watch this closely, and hopefully these storms don't get strong enough to produce any sort of tornadic activity. So we'll move this further along. And as you can see, I mean, the storms are going to be relatively isolated in nature. And then, I mean, then again, you only can take that at face value, because we have a tornado warning in central Missouri right now, which wasn't even in a severe weather threat area. All in the meanwhile, we have our snow that's popping up in North Dakota, which is kind of crazy, because 1 minute we're going to be getting snow around some parts of North Dakota, and then the next minute, and then by the weekend, we're looking at severe weather, which is crazy. Talk about the tale of a storm system here. Kind of messed up that reference here, but can I do? So we're gonna move further along. We're gonna go into Friday real quick. So we're about 17, 18 hours out. No, not 40, but 17 to 18. So move this along. NAM has a very similar picture to the GFS, but at this point, our mid-level low right here, very stout mid-level low, might I say. We're sitting at 994 millibar. Anything under 1,000 is usually pretty impressive for a land cyclone. So on the backside of this, we're getting a lot of snow around the Midwest and Idaho and Montana in particular, around the Four Corners, the Rocky Mountains, you got in the higher elevations, you guys are probably getting moderate to heavy snow. So, into the late evening hours, this is when we start, and into the overnight especially, that's when we start to see our storms pop up. I expect there to be a dry line-esque setup, but I do think that there is a cheeky tornado threat in here, and this sounding kind of proves it here. Lapse rates are solid, but as far as instability is concerned, when you see little notches like this, you kind of want to see it the other. You would look for it to be the other way, kind of like this dew point is, to really know that the atmosphere is unstable. But there's a little bit of stabilization at the lower levels. This could impede tornadic activity, which is what we're hoping for. But like I said, only way we'll know for sure is once everything begins to unfold, and we're still so far out. We can clearly see this line of storms here as well. So the main thing to look out for. Oh, this has a little bit better of a reading, slightly more unstable, good lapse rate. So this might be an area of interest. Anything in that line of storms might be interesting. So that means there could be some embedded supercells in there. And it makes sense because we're right next to the mid-level low here. There's often rotation associated with these, so these storms are likely to take advantage of it, especially the ones to the east of it. So we'll move this further along. This definitely looks to transition into a damaging wind threat and dissolves on Saturday, but I think a new line begins to form into the late evening hours, just like Friday setup is. Yep, and there we go. We actually have several line segments here. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of modes these storms are going to be in. If they're embedded supercells, the tornado threat could be high once again. Yep, and there's a marginal tornado threat with this. So definitely going to be a lot to watch on Saturday here. We're going to take a look at some of the parameters for this as well. I mean, we already went over the parameters for Friday. If you want to look at that video, I'll leave a link in the description for that. So let's go forward here. It's about 41 hours out. We'll take a look at the temperature. I'm going to watch it build from that point. Like I said, it's absolutely mental that we're getting temperatures that are in the mid to upper 30s around North Dakota, but about a day or two earlier we're getting snow. It's just absolutely insane. And then just look at how this warm air has made such a huge push to the north. We're seeing 80s in Michigan in April. What's going on here? Then even around Minnesota, we're getting into the 70s, into the late evening out, into the evening hours. And you can kind of see where the line of storms is expected to form based off this temperature map here too. Because you can see where there's 70s and 80s, and you can see where there's 70s and 80s behind this little gap right here, and you can see where it's cooled off. This is representing areas where it had been raining. Because whenever storms go through, you always will notice that the temperature will go down right after. So, very interesting setup here. We got a lot of warm, dry air behind this storm system, so this definitely lends itself towards a damaging wind threat. It'll be interesting to see how the models continue to play with this as we get closer to Saturday. But I do think that there's actually potential for Saturday to also be increased to an enhanced risk. So that's an interesting scenario that we have playing out here. Of course, we'll look at the dew points. So we'll kind of skip to the same time frame that we did in the last one, maybe a little further. We're mainly looking for 60s and 70s around this area, and I think we're definitely going to reach that for the most part, especially around where that line of storms is expected to develop. And even where it isn't, even though it's not quite at 60 around these areas, we're still in the upper 50s. I really think 55-degree dew points are sufficient enough for severe weather. When you are looking for storms to really thrive, that's when you're looking for those 60s, mid 60s and up. But it definitely reaches all the way into areas of central Minnesota, into Iowa, eastern Kansas, all the way through Oklahoma. No surprise there. It's that time of year for them. And then even around areas ahead of it, I mean, it's still pretty daggone moist. Probably going to be incredibly humid around these areas too. So it's going to be a very interesting. It's going to be a very interesting next couple of days, to say the least. Now here is the old low-level jet. I'm just hoping that this map actually does me right. I always get nervous when I pull up this map. Maybe it's just time for me to get a new computer. Hey, look at that. Look at, what luck here. But look at that. Look at this as well. Low-level jet's already sitting at 70 knots by the late morning into the early afternoon hours. And this doesn't really die out too much. We're still sitting at about 50, 60. We're not sitting at 70 around this area, but this could become an area of interest whenever storms pop up. I think right around here is going to be a point of interest for me. So we have marginal severe here. I mean, we're not surprised that that looks like a damaging wind threat. I think a little further south, it might be marginal tornado threat. No, still marginal severe. So I think right around the backside of this, maybe. There we go. Yep. So linear threat, but it also has a little bit of a curved hordeograph indicating a tornado threat. Lapse rates are sufficient. Atmosphere is destabilized. Not super destabilized, but it is destabilized enough for sufficient tornadic activity. Capes aren't the highest based off what I see on this sounding here, but we are sitting at the 1,000 to 1,500 mark based off of that. More than sufficient enough for severe weather. Definitely capable of producing tornadoes. So we'll move this along into the overnight. I think that's when we will get the strongest damaging straight line winds, because you'll see this little streak this little jet streak right here. So we'll have to watch this real close into the overnight, because we could get some pretty big wind reports from this if this were to reach the ground. So last thing we're going to look at are the lapse rates in the Cape. So we're just going to wait for this to load, of course. There we go. Haven't used the lapse rate map in a while, and it looks like everything's working today. That's a very rare treat for me, and I will take it gladly. So lapse rates are pretty impressive, but when the storms arrive, we kind of lose some of it. Instead of being at about 7, 8, 9 degrees Celsius per kilometer, now we're sitting at about maybe 6, and that does make a difference. The greater the lapse rate, the stronger the storms tend to be. I mean, I think around where the line of storms is expected to form, it'll be a little bit stronger. Like right around here, we're sitting at about a 7. But when you get to about 8, 9, and 10, that's when these storms can really start to thrive. You get really strong updrafts, which is conducive for both hail and tornadoes. So we do use this tool. So a lot of meteorologists will use this tool to kind of get an idea of the lift available in the atmosphere, as well as the instability. Because you can have Cape all day, but if you don't have a great lapse rate, it's almost meaningless. So we do have something to work with there, and then we'll actually take a look at the Cape and see how that corresponds. If you have those two in the same place, that basically means that the atmosphere is like a powder keg. So Just got one more to go, and I've had great luck so far, and it looks like it continues through this whole video. How about that, guys? It's a little bit of a longer one. I do apologize for that. I just kind of went on a little bit of a tangent here because you don't really see too many situations where we have tornado warnings outside of our severe area, but, and I'm not even saying that the National Weather Service got it wrong. It was just it's just one of those odd situations in which, well, really everybody was blindsided. There is some CAPE available, and it's ironic how it corresponds actually with the lapse rates. Like, there's some CAPE, but there's not a lot. Like, we're sitting at about 800 around here into the late evening and overnight hours around Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota. More impressive lapse rates seem to be right around here, but I do think this is going to be more of a damaging wind threat with embedded supercells. There we go. Clearly see it there. So we'll go to the end of this here, and we'll watch this CAPE kind of burn away. Sunday looks like a predictability too low situation according to the Storm Prediction Center. If something comes up, I'll be the first to fill you in on it. But this is all I got for you guys tonight. You guys have a good one. This has been Tyler Meadowhood, Weatherman. I will see you tomorrow. Have a good night.